Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Dr. Madeline Feldman, your host for the evening. My Tulane roots began at Newcomb, followed by my Tulane medical degree, residency in internal medicine at Tulane, fellowship in rheumatology. I am a native New Orleanian and a rheumatologist with the rheumatology group right here in New Orleans. I'm founder and past president of the Rheumatology Alliance of Louisiana and president of the Coalition of State Rheumatology Organizations, the national advocacy group for people with arthritis and the rheumatologists who treat them. This is one of the many webinars that the School of Medicine is offering. Each webinar is recorded, and we have an archive of the recordings on our website. Tonight, we will have some very interesting dialogue with our alumni on the topic of Big Charity New Orleans, a topic that brings many fond memories to all of us who as medical students rotated through charity and some of us trained at Big Charity. We will have the opportunity to hear from Tulane CFO Patrick Norton, who will share the future plans for this special building, with Tulane School of Medicine being part of the square footage that Tulane will occupy. During the webinar, should you have any questions at all for the speakers, please put them in the chat. And if time doesn't permit during the webinar, we will answer them following the webinar and email the answers to you. So let's get on and introduce our group of panelists. First, we have Dr. Wes Ely. He's a professor of medicine conducting research as a geriatric intensivist in the Division of Pulmonary and Critical Care Medicine and the Center for Health Services Research at Vanderbilt University School of Medicine. He's a leading ICU doctor whose unconventional methods minimize patients being harmed by the cutting-edge technologies that are saving their lives. His recently published book, Every Deep Drawn Breath, is a rich blend of science, medical history, profoundly humane patient stories, and personal reflection. He's the recipient of the Tulane Medical Alumni Outstanding Alumnus Award in 2018. Next, we have Dr. Robert Gold. Dr. Gold is my classmate, or was my classmate, and he's been in private practice as the senior pediatric ophthalmologist at Eye Physicians of Central Florida in Maitland and Orlando, Florida, since July 1987. Dr. Gold is on the staff of both the Arnold Palmer Children's Hospital and Florida Hospital for Children in Orlando, and is an assistant professor at the University of Central Florida School of Medicine. He's a member of the Tulane School of Medicine Board of Governors and a recipient of the TMAA Distinguished Service Award. Next, we have Dr. Amalia Landa Galindez. Dr. Landa Galindez is interim chair of the Department of Translational Medicine and chief of Internal Medicine Division at the FIU Herbert Wertheim College of Medicine in Miami, Florida. She's an internist specializing in primary disease prevention, cardiovascular and musculoskeletal disorders, and serves on national committees of the American College of Physicians, the Alliance for Academic Internal Medicine, and the Association of American Medical Colleges. Dr. Landa Galindez is president of the Tulane Medical Alumni Association Board of Directors. Next, we have Dr. Gwen Melton. Dr. Melton is a private practitioner in rheumatology, yay, go rheum, is board certified in both internal medicine and rheumatology. She's a fellow and committee member of the American College of Rheumatology and co-founder, vice president, and co-chair of advocacy for the Association of Women in Rheumatology. And as former president of the North Carolina Rheumatology Association and current board member, she still represents the state of North Carolina for the American College of Rheumatology, Association of Women in Rheumatology, and North Carolina Rheumatology Association in Washington, D.C., and her state. She is a member of the Tulane Medical Alumni Association Board of Directors. Next, we have Dr. Gary Wiltz. Dr. Wiltz, board certified internist, is the chief executive officer of Touch Action Clinics, a network of 15 federally qualified community health centers located in 7 parishes in Southwest Louisiana, with the main site in Franklin. His 3-year NHSC commitment, which began in 1982, has turned into a lifetime of service to the people that he serves in Franklin and to the state of Louisiana. Among his many honors, Dr. Wiltz was named Medical Director of the Year in 94 and 95 by the Louisiana Primary Care Association, and in 1996 was selected as one of only 10 national recipients of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's prestigious Community Health Leadership Award. Dr. Wiltz more recently served as co-chair of Governor John Bel Edwards' Health Care Transition Team. And last but not least, we have Patrick Norton. Patrick is the Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Tulane University. In this role, Patrick is responsible for all operational aspects of the university, including finance, facilities management, capital planning, and real estate, human resources, information technology, business services, risk management. Well, you do a lot, Patrick. Campus police, internal audit and emergency preparedness, and business continuity. In his short tenure, he has redesigned the university's approach to budgeting, creating the opportunity for deans to function as their own CEO, allowing for innovative programming and investment at the school level. A passionate member of the community, Patrick devotes considerable time to organizations committed to New Orleans and the state of Louisiana. He's a member of the board at Tulane Medical Center and is a board member at New Orleans College Prep, a pre-K through grade 12 charter school network. Okay, well, without further ado, let's start getting some memories going. Let's start with Wes Ely. Dr. Ely, you want to share some of your charity memories with us?
I sure would. Can you hear me okay and see me?
You sound great.
Fantastic. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here tonight. We all love charity, and we all have a passion for the role it's played in our lives. And what I decided to do to share with you tonight was just to read you 4 short paragraphs out of the prologue of Every Deep Drawn Breath, 2 of which are going to be kind of setting up this patient's story, which was a story of the first patient I ever cared for as a medical student at Big Charity. So the first paragraph as follows. I'd come to New Orleans a couple of years earlier as a Tulane medical student in 1985. Charity Hospital, a 250-year-old refuge in the sweaty South, provided health care to the poorest of the poor. Its air was heavy with history. Alton Ochsner, Michael DeBakey, Rudolph Mattis, icons in medicine and surgery, had trained there decades before and left their marks of excellence. For years, Charity had been the largest hospital in the country. And at night, we medical students would sneak up on the roof of the central 20-story tower and peer over the 2,680-bed behemoth, contemplating the great chasm between where we were and where we needed to be in becoming physicians. It was a dizzying feeling. All those sick people down there who needed care, who were putting their trust in us. One such night, my roommate, Darren Portnoy, who later on became the leader of Doctors Without Borders, of Médecins Sans Frontières, and I made a pact that we'd steer our medical journeys to help the people who needed us most, those people without a voice, perhaps the Ruthies of the world. I just, in the book, told a story about Ruthie the Duck Lady, who many of you may know, a famous New Orleanian. The emergency room was always full, packed so tight we'd have to walk in zigzags back and forth just to get through the masses of people waiting to be tended to. It was both a local clinic and a trauma center for those with the flu, advanced cancer, gunshot wounds, and everything in between. People screamed in pain, pleading for relief, the constant din, a soundtrack to our work in Big Charity, urging us on. The humanity at Charity ran as thick as a slow-cooked Mississippi River brown roux, and I couldn't get enough of it. Well, as a medical student, I was privileged enough to be able to care for a woman named Sarah Bollock. I'm going to read you just 2 paragraphs of the intro where I'm beginning my journey as a medical student. And this book, Every Deep Drawn Breath, by the way, is not a memoir. Even though I'm remembering some of the things of my life, it's a book of narrative nonfiction, which is all true stories of real people. And the pictures of these people are even found on the internet, on our website, which is at icudelirium.org. And by the way, all of the money from this project is being used to provide help and support for COVID survivors and their families. My desire to become a doctor was sown in the fertile Louisiana produce fields, a youthful notion of wanting to help others, and by a quote I held close from Of Mice of Men. When George says, "We got a future," Lenny breaks in with, "And why? Because I got you to look after me, and you got me to look after you, and that's why." I like the idea of being there for people who needed me. When I arrived at Charity, I felt I truly found my calling. In my third year of medical school, my first patient was Sarah Bollock. Sarah had grown up in a clapboard shotgun house on Desire Street in the 9th Ward in East New Orleans. She was 23 years old with a 1-week-old baby and should have been at home bonding with her newborn child. Instead, she huddled in a brown blanket in a large open ward intensive care unit in profound shock. Sarah was sick with peripartum cardiomyopathy, a rare and deadly disease of the heart muscle that occurs in a small number of pregnant or postpartum women. When I first met her, she looked at me with eyes full of fear, as if she were praying for help, but couldn't find the words. She was terrified she was going to die. We were the same age. In order not to take too much of my time, the next paragraph describes the time I spent with Sarah, holding her hand. And as a student, I had to care for her, titrating manually her dopamine drip. And it was very laborious going up on the dopamine if her blood pressure got too low, down if her blood pressure got too high. But it meant I spent a lot of time with her. And I asked you all to remember your time at Charity and think about how intensely personal those moments and memories are. I can still see Sarah's dark brown eyes looking at me. And to close, what's happening to me, Dr. Wes? She asked again and again. Or why can't I be home with my baby? Unsure of myself, my nascent knowledge, I fumbled through some facts. Her blood pressure was too low. Her heart was failing. We hoped it would improve. We both knew she was likely to die. I could see it in her eyes, and I'm sure she could see it in mine. But she continued to trust my medicine and me. And that's really what it's all about, isn't it? All of us with our memories of Charity and our love of the place. And so I'm privileged to be here with you tonight. And I thank you for your time and remembering back to the patients that were our devotion. That's our North Star. If we keep those memories in the forefront of our mind, then we won't lose our way. Thank you so much. You're muted.
Yes. Boy, that was wonderful, Wes. Man, very, very articulate. We could only all write like that. Next, we go to Bob Gold. Bob, share a few memories with us.
Wes, that was fantastic. Mine are going to be a little bit not as let me tell you two really quick stories. One when I was a medical student, one when I was a resident. As a medical student, all of us had the experience of bullpen. And in bullpen, we're way up high, and your mentors, Watts Webb, Ed Peebles, Ron Nichols, we were looking down at them. They were looking at us, up at us. And during one surgical grand rounds, all of a sudden my beeper went off. And if you remember those beepers had voice on them. And who would it be? With my lovely wife, Gail, saying, please stop on your way home and buy some milk. When that happened, you can imagine who was picked on the rest of that grand rounds. It was bullpen. I had things thrown at me for the rest of that time. It was very embarrassing. I will never forget that. The second was, I was an LSU ophthalmology resident. So I went over to the dark side. But the great thing about Charity Hospital was that there were LSU days and Tulane days, and you got to know your Tulane and LSU residents. Well, in my third year residency, I was a chief resident, and my daughter was about to be, my wife was about to give birth to my daughter. So it's not about my wife here, but the day that things were coming, I, as a third year resident, had my first trabeculectomy. That's a glaucoma procedure that's not done as much anymore. And I went in, was waiting for the transport people to come to get my patient. I told my wife, please keep your legs crossed. I can't, you gotta wait. You don't get these procedures too much. So I was waiting, and I said to myself, okay, I'm gonna take my patient. I'm gonna take them to the elevator. I'm gonna take them up to the operating room. I'm gonna wheel them up to into the operating room. I'm gonna do my case, which I did. I am going to then take my patient back down to the ward. I'm going to go out. I'm going to get to my wife, and I'm going to take her to the hospital to get delivered. It was a torrential New Orleans rainstorm, but we made it. And here we are today, fellow Tulane student, my daughter and son-in-law. And anyway, so those are two things that are indelible in my mind of Charity Hospital. And so those are my two stories.
Thank you, Bob. Oh boy, yeah, I was pregnant when I was in medical school. I have some pretty interesting memories too. But let's go over to Amalia. Amalia, share some of your good ones.
Yes, thank you. And I'd like to welcome alumni and welcome students, especially. I hope we have a lot of medical students joining us today. In my current role, a big part of what I do is to advise students as far as residency. So I'd like to share a memory about what life was like back in the day when we were medical students. I'm an internist and I love internal medicine, but when I think of Charity, I have vivid memories of OB, of what it was like on the OB clerkship. When you arrived at Charity, you got through the very busy Tulane Avenue, you're looking at the hospital, remember passing by that little artificial truck that had like coffee and donuts. But as you enter the impressive Charity, this incredible architecture from the 1930s, the hallways to the left and to the right, a hustle and bustle of students, nurses, doctors, these grand elevators, gold plated on either side. You see this incredible painting of the Sisters of Charity, of one of the nuns with her fancy hat. So it's like we can visualize this. Then you go up the elevator, you come out on the OB floor. So different from any hospital you see now. Now there's individual rooms, there's so much patient privacy. Sometimes it gets a little bit lonely. Sometimes patients are kind of on their own. But you hopped out on the OB floor, and first you went into the first section where women are in the early phases of labor. There is always music, full blast, loud music. To this day, anytime I hear the song, It Takes Two by Rob Bass, I'm transported back to that OB area. The women were like a community. There were young girls going into labor who were teenagers. There were older women. They would give each other advice. The older women would tell the young girls, breathe deeply, breathe to the rhythm of the music. Music was so important. They were so kind to us. They were like, what do you need to do? Ask me anything you want to do. Examine me. It was like you really felt connected to the patients, to the nurses, to the community. Then you jump over to the room where the woman was about to give birth, waiting incessantly, sometimes in the middle of the night. We didn't want to miss a thing. It's not like now where you can't wait to get out so you can go study. We were there 24 hours. We were blessed that we didn't have to take all these board exams. We didn't have to take the exam till we were finished. So we lived for hours. You wanted to be at the hospital. We didn't want to go to the call rooms because that was like in a separate, very scary part of the hospital with dimly lit lighting. So rarely did anyone venture to those call rooms. So there would be a storage room and it had old chairs. So we would get our rest in the chairs that were the old 1930s type of delivery chairs with the stirrups. So we'd just sit there, we'd rest, I remember being there with fellow students, Mark and Kevin, and we're just waiting until we get called. And then the excitement when you get called to go in and deliver a baby. And you did so much. It's like you were a student, but really to the patient, you were their partner, you were their confidant, you were their doctor. And I think that's what makes Charity so special, is that since everything was open, the patients always had companies, the students, the doctors, we were all really connected. And it's so hard to ever reproduce that setting, but that's why Charity is so special to our hearts. And that's why we're so excited about this new project to restore Charity. So that's just one of my many vivid memories that I wanted to share. Thank you.
Oh, that was great. That was great, Amalia. Okay, next is Gwen. Unmute.
Well, good evening, and thanks for sharing the stories. They brought back quite a few memories. I am going to touch on the third year, just like some of our other colleagues pointed out. The third year was a very impressive year for all of us because that was the first time we got to put on those short white coats with our Tulane emblem on it and get our stethoscopes out and actually use them. And we put them on real patients. So the third year was the most impressive for all of us, and we got an opportunity to learn exactly the way my colleagues have said. We were all over the place, and we actually became the confidants for the patients. The T numbers and the L numbers are very important. Dr. Gold brought them up. One of the jobs of the third-year medical student was to go into the bowels of the basement in the record room and find out if the patient had a T number or an L number. If you were on call, if Tulane was on call, you were looking to see if that patient had an L number so you wouldn't have to take them. If Tulane was taking the patient, then we would try to grab them and get them onto our services. The amount of sheer humanity and people that needed to be taken care of was so much in that hospital that we actually could divide the wards up. And there was always plenty of work for the Tulane services and for the L services or the LSU students. When we got those patients up to the wards, we did exactly what my colleague said. Dr. Ely and Dr. Landa Galinza pointed out very nicely how we interacted with those patients, and we became their advocates, and we took excellent care of them. But end of the mornings, when you're finished, we all had to get to the amphitheaters or to the lecture halls at Tulane, and you would see all the little third-year students disappear off of all the wards and head to the tunnel. And in that tunnel, we would go and get to our classes on time. And that tunnel was full of humanity and all sorts of traffic back and forth. Residents, attending doctors, third-year, fourth-year medical students. And I'm going to save this for Dr. Wiltz, but I'm pretty sure there were a couple of mammalian rodents down there with us. That was a fascinating experience. Charity taught me well, and I'm so proud of Charity. And I thank you for sharing all of your stories. And I'm going to pass the buck to my colleague, Dr. Wiltz, who we were on those wards and in those tunnels together.
Thank you, Gwen. I remember being sent down to medical records many times looking for an L number on a patient that came into the emergency room. Oh, Lord. Okay, Gary, take it away.
Well, thanks. First of all, it's great to be with all of you. And I think I might have the only distinction on this panel being the only one that was actually born at Charity Hospital. I was born at Charity in 1953, the sixth of 7 children. And I guess my perspective is not just one memory, but a flood of memories. And I think a lot of you touched upon different things, but the perspective on which you physically approached that building gave you so many different memories. Gwenessa talked about the tunnel, and yes, you were right. That tunnel led, if you left from the cafeteria, the bookstore, the student lounge, and then you went down the mezzanine and went through the tunnel. And when you got in the basement of Charity, not only was the medical records down there, the cafeteria was down there. And we'd go to the cafeteria after being on call, but also what was down there was the morgue. And I remember Dr. Johnson insisting in his students, we had to be first assistants on autopsies, which I think is probably almost unheard of in today's medical training. So we were, as you can recall, Gwenessa, we must have attended about 30 autopsies. But then if you approach Charity Hospital from the backside, where the emergency room ramp was, that was a whole different experience, being out on the ramp, greeting the ambulances and the police cars, entering that waiting room that was described earlier, and then going to the accident room. Where you saw everything, all the gunshot wounds, stab wounds, and remember the double doors with the porthole cutouts that the suture room that we would do the suturing, and orthopedics was all the way in the back. I spent my residency on the perfect acronym, the West Admit Room, or the War Room, as we used to call it. And as charge resident, I remember patients coming in through there, and us having a blackboard staging stage 1, 2, 3. I don't know if y'all remember the asthma room where we had 10 reclining chairs set up. And I try to tell students today we would run aminophylline drips into people. We didn't have therapeutic levels. So when they got nauseated, we knew they were in the therapeutic range. And that's how we would hand titrate the drips, as was said earlier. If you approach from the Tulane Avenue side, then you went Amelia described, coming into the amphitheater and seeing the big seal on the ground floor. Elevator operators that were run by live people, actually. And the stop that you did not want to make first was the third floor, the notorious psych ward, which I remember going on that floor with my back to the wall to keep everything in front of me as a medical student. Going up to the fifth floor, the medicine ward, where I had the great honor, my attendings were Seathorpe, Ray, and George Birch. And Gwenessa can remember, morning report as students, and then later as internal medicine residents. That was an experience of itself. 10th floor that you mentioned earlier, where we did OB deliveries. And we never did get to visit the on-call room where you could sleep, because that never happened. We stayed up the whole night. But finally, for all the building's attributes and the physical structure, the one thing that I think unites all of us was a spirit of charity. That spirit of humanity, that spirit of pride in all the things that we've done. I don't know, I know Gwenessa had a military career, I didn't, but charity was as close to MASH when I see the camaraderie, the spirit, the collegiality, and the whole atmosphere that encompassed is a shared spirit that we all had. I know it can never be reduplicated or duplicated and replaced, but I'm hoping that with this new spirit of charity, and we're all looking forward to Patrick's presentation, that we can continue the legacy of the 300-year plus history of the spirit of the state of Louisiana. And I always say this when I'm on the national stage, we were the only state that named it what it was, Charity Hospital. And I'm proud to be a part of this panel and looking forward to Patrick's presentation.
Yep. So I do have one or two memories, and the one was the T&L. One it's kind of a sobering, because I remember it was my first, patient that I had to take care of myself, and it was medicine. And it was in a ward, so they were just like little curtains, but everybody was all in the same. And I had to go and tell the patient and their family that he had metastatic cancer. And I was not prepared to do that. We hadn't learned anything about how you do that. And to this day, I can still feel what it feels like to do that. And I don't think a lot of, that kind of experience. And then, in the early 80s, when all of the gay men came in and nobody knew what they had. And there we were, trying to figure out what they had. I mean, there were just so many. And then in terms of morning report with Dr. Ray, y'all remember, if you weren't going fast enough on that table, he'd be going like this with the pen. And, you had to talk faster and get it over with. I mean, just so many memories. I still dream about getting on the elevator and not getting on the right floor to find my patient. I still have charity dreams. So with that, I'd like to introduce Patrick Norton. Please tell us about the future of charity.
Yeah, so great stories, and I'm sure everybody, so you have many, many more stories. People that have Zoomed in have many, many stories, or many on the Zoom have many stories. So I feel honored and actually privileged to work on this project. And after hearing some of these stories, it's like a huge responsibility to get it right. So thank you for those stories and keep them coming. I actually went back on my calendar to look at when I first had a conversation with one of the potential developers to redevelop Charity. And as you know, Charity had been shuttered since Katrina, so that goes back to 2005. And my first conversation was 2018. So we're nothing but persistent, right? So 2018, I had my first conversation, and we signed our lease with the developer in November of 21. So that's the good news. And the developer, we signed that lease, and we were occupying nearly 350,000 square feet through this long-term lease. And so over the next few years, the developers in Tulane will transform Charity into a mixed-use complex. And you got to remember, it's 1 million square feet, as many of you recall. It's a huge complex, right? And it's going to be a mixed-use building. And within our space, it's going to be a mixed-use building. So the complexity of this project shouldn't be lost on anyone. It's going to be a mixed-use complex with apartments, retail, educational institutions, and other uses, all anchored by Tulane's academic and research presence. So in the 350,000 square feet of our piece of charity, it's going to be anchored with academics and research. We will be the core tenant, and we're going to be really, at the end of the day, enabling the major development and reimagining of this iconic Tulane Avenue building, which once again has remained empty since Hurricane Katrina in 2005. When we go into the space, we expect to occupy the space, and I'll go over in more detail in a second. In 2025, that'll be 20 years after Katrina, right? 20 years after Katrina, we would be occupying that space. This is a central component of our major expansion of Tulane's downtown campus in the heart of the city's biomedical corridor. The goal is to place more labs and scientists together in Innovation District downtown, where Tulane discoveries can come to market faster, launch spin-out companies, support community startup talent, and attract outside investment designed to transform New Orleans into a hub of bioscience and research. I don't know if you've been following this, but external funding for Tulane research has risen close to 50% over the last 4 years and is expected to increase another 50% over the next few years. As Mike Fitz, our president, likes to say, the American landscape is filled with cities that have been transformed to become leaders of the 21st century economy, thanks to the presence of a major research university in the center of their downtown commercial district. This is the shared future of New Orleans and Tulane, and charity is going to play a huge part of that. And developing the building in a way that is true to their roots, and hearing these stories really hit that home. True to the roots and spirits of the historic former charity hospital has been a guiding principle for Tulane University since the project's inception. So even back 3 years ago, thinking about what we can do in charity, we wanted to stay true to the roots of charity. Now, we can't do patient care in charity, that's precluded, but we're going to be doing other things as well. So by ensuring the redevelopment is anchored by research, searching for the newest discoveries, and by public health and medical school classrooms, training next generations of physicians and leaders in public health and healthcare, all in a space that is accessible and open to the community, we will remain true to those roots. The project developers and us will spend the next 2.5 years completing the base building construction, and then we come in and develop and customize our space with the goal of occupying the building in 2025. Special care will be taken to retain charity's iconic Art Deco facade, main lobby, second floor auditorium, and other historical characteristics while renovating the interior to realize the full potential of the building in a new way. So that's kind of my long wind up before I get into the presentation.
Very good.
So let's go to the operating principles. So here are the principles behind the redevelopment of charity. It will be the new home for the School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine. So right now, the School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine is located in Tidewater on Canal Street. They are going to move over to charity and take some of the space in charity. And then those of us that are in 1555 Poitras, which is right across from the Dome and right behind charity, the office space, which we take up over 125,000 square feet here, we will then move it to Tidewater. So that is kind of a way to make our campus downtown a little more like a campus and start bringing all these units together. So that's number one. Number two, School of Medicine needs research space. We are almost flat out of research space. We're renovating tons of space in Hutchinson. We're reconfiguring space in JBJ. We're renting space at Nobic because of the explosion in our research, and mainly coming out of the School of Medicine. So we're looking to add significant amount of research space in charity, but also other areas of downtown. This is not the last development project we're going to be doing. Number three, this is an expensive proposition. Probably why no one has done it in the past 20 years. And really Tulane is enabling this to happen. Without Tulane, it'd be very difficult for anyone to move this project forward. But we must maximize cash flow. So our costs need to be, are at market for office and research space. And we're going to heavy research space here. Less office, more research space. But the cost of developing this property is on market. We need to focus on net incremental cash flows through the recruitment of additional researchers to the district. This space, this research space, will be able to house over 600 research professionals in charity. We're very excited about that. And then we're gonna have some differential pricing based on space type. Retail is more expensive than instructional space. Instructional space is more expensive than office space, and research space is the most expensive space we have. We need to use that space intensely and productively. So there's gonna be tons of shared space, right? Shared classrooms. You know, public health and school medicine, you know, there'll be a sharing of space and common spaces. We need highly productive labs and cash flowing two-lane retail spaces. Now, we're going to use the space, you know, I'd love to use the space 24/7, and some of the building will be 24/7 because of the housing component. It'll be in the other part that the developer is developing. But, you know, there'll be opportunities in the evenings for a school professional advancement to teach classes downtown, which right now they're located in Elmwood and also in the Uptown campus. So the whole idea is to use the space intensely, right, and productively, and really create a lot of energy in this building. So once again, Tulane is going to anchor around 350,000 square feet out of the 1 million square feet. You just kind of see the blue, that's us. Naming, we have naming rights over the entire complex. The whole 1 million square feet of, so we negotiated that, so we have that, and we also have the sole and exclusive naming on the LaSalle side. So LaSalle Tower is closest to Hutchinson. So that was the whole idea, right? We want to create the connection between Hutchinson and Charity, and that's where we are at the LaSalle Tower. We are build actually, this is not only likely, we are creating a condo structure where Tulane will have the option to purchase our lease portion. That's important to us. So in 10 years, when a lot of these credits start rolling off, we'll have an opportunity to purchase our piece of Charity. And once again, the expected occupancy is by Q1 2025. The design process. So we conducted an RFP process in Q1 of 2021, and we have selected Payette and EDR design team. Payette is national, EDR is more local, but they have, Payette especially has national research experience. This is what they do. And once again, a lot of the space will be research and really laboratories. And they have a deep understanding of this building. And that came across, and we interviewed a number of firms, and they certainly rose to the top. The kickoff design process happened after we released the lease execution, which happened around Thanksgiving. And a couple of kind of principles around this is, we want to be open to the public to a degree. Obviously not the research labs, but there's a tremendous amount of space, as you know, because you were in Charity, a lot of open space and when you come into Charity. So the first floor is around 60,000 square feet, and that's going to be open and accessible for the most part to the public. So what goes in there is really important. Type of retail and the type of environment we create is going to be really important to this project. We need to create an opportunity for faculty, students, and staff from all schools, School of Medicine, Public Health, School of Social Work, which are all located down there, to connect and collaborate. To that end, we're going to be creating 20,000 square feet of student space, a space cafe, student study space where students can connect and collaborate. Is something that they do not have right now. Once again, enable the research growth through state-of-the-art flexible lab space, right? We have an opportunity now with this great design team to create very productive, but also very, very contemporary and state-of-the-art research space. And then once again, state-of-the-art teaching and learning environments. This will be a design for the School of Medicine, the School of Public Health, and the School of Professional Advancement to all be able to use these classrooms in some type of shared way. And then once again, this will be the home for the School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine. Design process is going to take 12 months. So we're in it right now. We're engaging our stakeholders, heavy with the School of Medicine, School of Public Health, and a little light with school professional advancement because they're really going to be beneficiaries of using some of the classroom space in the evenings, but very, very deep collaboration with the School of Medicine and the leadership there, and also the School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine. Timeline and milestones. Well, you saw the lease execution, so we're past that. Developer still needs to finalize their financial closing. While we have a lease, and that should open the door, obviously, to permanent financing, they still have to line that up, and we hope that they would have that up in the next couple of months. We are, after concept program, we are in SDs and CDs, and that's going to get from Q4 2021 to Q4 2022. Base building construction is really important. That's what the developer does. They build out the base building. Once they are done, which we expect to be done in Q2 of 2023, we come in and do our construction of our space. We made it very clear we wanted to control our space for various reasons. Once it's going to be so complex and so different, that we some student space, some instructional space, some office space, and a lot of research, that we wanted to control the development of our space. So we're going to do our construction, and we expect to move in Q1 25. And that's kind of what it's, that's kind of some sketches. We're still, going to get some renderings out, and we're going to have a website, and we're going to, once again, we signed this lease a couple of months ago, and we've been, hitting the gas on this to move through our development and our design phase. And that's the last slide. This is going to be a multi-use space, once again, in a multi-use environment. It's not the last development we're going to do downtown. We're looking at certainly some interesting renovations in Hutchinson, once again, around research. I can't say enough. I mean, the research productivity and the research footprint of our university, driven largely by the School of Medicine, has been nothing short of phenomenal. To grow at 50% over the past few years and project to grow another 50% is a testament to the work that's happening in that school. And we need to provide the infrastructure to support it, or we're not going to be able to attract or retain our talented School of Medicine and School of Public Health faculty. So I'm going to stop there.
We do have a couple questions that have come in. So if anyone in the listening audience has some questions, please put it into the chat. The first is actually from Eli Quintos, who is actually in my class, our class. He's asking, how is the structural integrity of the building and foundation after all these years and Katrina? Anything there need to be addressed?
So it's interesting. So if you watch the documentary Big Charity, and I think you all probably have seen it, and not to go over it, but the one thing I recall from is the General Honore coming through and saying, he cleaned it. Him and his team cleaned it out, and it was ready. It was ready to be occupied right at the time. And I got to tell you, Charity has great bones, strong structural bones, and it's emblematic of some of the buildings we've seen throughout the country. When we looked at comparable, whether it's in Detroit or Memphis, these buildings were built to last. So the structural integrity, we have no issues with that. And very little has been done since Katrina. There's been a little abatement, but not much. So there's going to be a fair amount of abatement and demoing that happens. But we're all prepared for that. I've toured Charity recently from top to bottom, and obviously I had to walk up all the way up to the top because the elevators weren't working. And yeah, good bones. Yeah, it's a bit of a mess, but that's got to be cleaned out, and people can do that very quickly. So not really too concerned about that.
So Martha Boone asks, what's planned for the other 2/3 of the Charity space?
There's going to be a lot of housing, a lot of residential units are going to be built. There's also going to be a charter school that's going to move in, a high school, which I think is great. Also, pre-K will be moving in, so we're going to have an educational component, which is pretty exciting. And then there's also a bunch of retail. We want to make this accessible and open to the public, especially that first floor. That's so huge and so iconic. And there'll be a ton of retail in there, meaning places to eat and drink and gather. And we want to make it open. Our downtown campus is not open, right? It's pretty much shut off from our community, and we want to make it more accessible. And that's part of the plan too. Charity is just one part of our overall development of downtown. And we want to make it more accessible and open to our community. We think that's really important.
One of the questions is, on what floor are you going to open up Joe's Bar? Those of us, we all remember Joe's.
Probably not upstairs in any of the floors, but I think there'll be plenty of places to get a drink. And by the way, we just opened up, this is a kind of a shameless plug, I guess, but we just opened up a new apartment complex that's for the Tulane community, the old Warwick Hotel, which, by the way, was shuttered longer than Charity, right? I think it's pre-Katrina when it was shut down. We're the anchor tenant. We master leased the building with a developer, and we've got 157 apartments ranging from 2 bedrooms to studios, and Tulaneans are moving in. We have MDs moving in, we have researchers moving in, and if you know where that is, that's right next to JBJ. I mean it's right next to JBJ, and it's a real and it's you move in, it's turnkey. The only thing you have to figure out is how to pay for cable. Utilities are all included, etc. It's furnished. So we may want to make it easy for our community, whether they're residents or PhD students or MDs or researchers. So that's going to have a long windup to say there's going to be dining in there. And that's going to be Duke Chase's, one of the from the Duke Chase family, is going to have a restaurant in 1315. We're building it out now. So there's going to be dining options.
William Turner's asking, do we have a name for the project?
Besides the charity project, not really. We didn't come with a special name yet, because it's really, usually come with special days when it's a secret. This is the charity project. Spirit of Charity sounds good as well. But at the end, we are really calling it the Charity Redevelopment Project. Yeah.
So in particular, any kind of retail that you're talking about? Some suggestions have been, bookstore, et cetera.
Absolutely. So we're thinking about a campus store that'll be a bookstore. We're thinking about maybe a museum of sort that speaks to charity, its history. We're going to be able to do a lot in our space, right? And we don't want to duplicate what's going to happen on the others, the other 2/3. So if they're going to have a Starbucks or whatever they're going to have, Starbucks or PJs or whatever, we don't want to duplicate that. So we'll ride on their coattails, and they'll ride on our coattails a little bit. But we're going through a retail study right now, but I can tell you it's going to have a fair amount of retail, and that will include restaurants and cafes and places where people can hang out.
Right. Good. Someone did ask also, is the state kicking in any money?
I guess, yeah, in an indirect way through, tax credits, et cetera. There is funding. But this was is very, as you might imagine, this is a complicated project. Charity is owned by LSU, who's leased it to the developer, who's then leased it to us, right? So there is a chain. And then, I guess you could say there's some funding coming from the state, but it's not really as direct as one might imagine. Yeah.
Adrian Williams is asking, any plans for any kind of parking in any of the building?
I'm surprised it wasn't the first question, because that's usually what I get. I get that. There'll be some, but there won't be as much as frankly, a building of that size would warrant. On the other hand, if you look around that area, there's not a shortage of parking garages or parking, lots. So we feel there's plenty of parking very, very close by.
Jean Barry wants to know, are we working with LSU at all on these plans?
No, this is a Tulane project. LSU, once again, had control of the building, and they leased it to a developer to develop, to put it back into commerce. And I think that's the one thing I want to say as well is LSU is excited about this project. My discussions with them when they approved they knew we were involved. I went to their board meeting in Baton Rouge. I even wore a purple tie in solidarity. Yes, I did. I did that. But this is an opportunity for us to work together to put this building back in commerce. When you think about 20 years of charity, and by the way, for those of you that live here like I do, you can't drive anywhere, any of the highways, any of the byways without seeing charity. And it's and it's sad, right? To see it just, this ghostly building that just has been sitting there waiting for somebody to redevelop it. And we're the catalyst, there's no doubt.
There are some areas that are of historic note, and are those going to be preserved? And actually, will the bullpen be preserved?
Yeah, so I'm not sure. So I've been asking my team about this bullpen. What floor is it on? Is it on the 12th floor? Okay, yes, it will be.
Okay.
So what needs to be preserved? The facade, of course, right? The facade needs to be preserved. The windows, so all those windows have to be, preserved, and that will mean replacing them with historic type windows. Some corridors, we're working with them around corridors because we do want some flexibility with the corridors because we need that lab space, right? We need that, we need more space. The operating auditoriums on the 12th floor will be maintained, and the flooring, including the seal on the first floor, of course, will be preserved. So there'll be other, we have to work with the state historic preservation group, and also the National Park Service actually has jurisdiction over this. And this might be the largest project that has come before them. So we'll have to work with them as to what gets preserved and what doesn't. Obviously, we want to be flexible we got to make it functional, but also pay respect to the history of the building. So we're going to find that balance.
Diana McDermott asked, what about the basketball court?
Yeah, I didn't see it when I went on my tour. I'm not sure if it even if something happened. No, the basketball court.
No basketball court.
No,
Okay.
there will be no basketball court on the,
We
on
get
the
to
top floor.
space. I'll take that. Let's see. We also have a couple other questions. Do you feel like the timeline is realistic? That we'd be able to get in, and what did you say, Q1 of 24?
25.
25.
Yeah, we do. We are, this is, we're in design mode now. As long as, once again, as long as the developer can start their work when they said they could on the base building, then I have no doubt we'll be in there in Q1 of 2025, where I can try to get in as quickly as possible. They're really, and I can't say this enough, there is a real need for this space, right? And it can't come fast enough. That's how well things are going downtown.
That's great.
And I'll say it again, it's not the last you will hear from me on development opportunities.
One other question. We do have a couple more, but what about the tunnel?
We've been talking about that too. It's not a place you want to go down there now. It's that might have some issues. I'm gonna say structurally, but it's very damp and wet, and I know we've been talking about maybe running some energy infrastructure through it, but it's going to be used. I'm not sure exactly what, but I heard the stories and I've heard other stories about the tunnel, and it's very interesting how connected everything. But right now we're not sure, but we'll do something with it.
So first I want to open it up if any of the panelists have a question, and then I have a final question for the panelists, but any of the panelists have a question? Gary?
Yeah. Are you involved in the School of Architecture in any of the plans?
Not so much, not so much. We these projects can really get complicated, right? We really have a world-class design firm that we've engaged with. It's just, I mean, I can't say enough about Payette, and they've been very thoughtful, and they've been trying to balance those principles, right? I'm the COO, but also, all finance reports to me, so I'm always gonna be hard driving, the finances, right? And making sure it's a cash flowing, because it isn't expensive. This is very expensive. So they've really listened, and I've been very, very impressed with some of the design work I've seen, where they're getting some great lab space designed, but at the same time, great student space, great instructional space, really marrying a lot of this together. It's actually going to be pretty incredible project at the end of the day.
I think so.
I have a question, if it's okay.
Yeah, Wes.
First of all, amazing presentation, and thank you so much for your oversight and guidance. Is there any way, you mentioned that we could preserve the bullpen because it's very high in the building, but I think it'd also be a beautiful thing to restore and preserve one of the open wards with the cast iron beds, and then maybe one operating room or something like that. Is there any plan to preserve those patient care areas in an operating room?
There isn't, but that's a really interesting idea to maybe do that, and I'll just bring it up to the team. But that's a very interesting idea, and I assume very soon we'll have a website where people can get their thoughts and reflections on charity. Not that we're gonna chase down every suggestion, but that's a great one to kind of
I mean,
memorialize.
it wouldn't cost that much. And those beds are just old-timey, I'm sure some of them are still there. I know that. And the operating room, some of the most famous surgeons in the world operated in those rooms. Just to have those areas to enter, the bullpen, an open ward, and an OR would be amazing.
Yeah, not a great idea. Thank you.
Absolutely.
You might want to consider a museum with
Yes.
pictures of those things.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are, but we were thinking about doing that down lower, right? So it's open to the community. And that's because it's going to be a little more difficult, because we have research. I mean, we're going to have research being performed. We don't want the community kind of traipsing through that, right? So let us think about it, but it's a great idea to. I mean, that's part of the museum concept. Yeah.
Saving the wooden wheelchairs as well. Steve McCullough is asking, what's the budget? It's
significant. I really don't want to get into the details of the budget, but it is expensive. We negotiated a good deal. It was 3.5 years from my first meeting with one of the potential developers, and then COVID hits and Ida hits, and you're kind of navigating all that. But it's expensive to develop. I'll just leave it at that. It's significant.
Yeah. Let me just throw this out to the panelists, because we just have a couple minutes left. But what ways of learning and teaching at Charity do you wish still existed today in our teaching hospitals? Anyone?
The hands-on. I mean, you all mentioned Seathorpe Ray. I mean, he could go up to a patient, look, put his ear on them, and he knew what was going on. It's the more personal touch of the old-time charity doctors that we like to instill in today's physician. And that's what Charity did. It instilled the medicine and medical care on all of us. And that's why all of us have such passion for what it did to us.
Anyone else?
I agree.
And a lot of
I do
us are-
think
I'm
I
sorry,
do think
Gary.
that sometimes we had a little too much freedom, but if it was you trained on real people, and but it taught you compassion. I think as Wes was saying, to be at the bedside monitoring a drip or looking at an oscilloscope for telemetry monitoring, and you were the one at the bedside, that humanism is.
Yep. Gwen?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm still doing a great deal of teaching, particularly the internal medicine residents and family practice residents, and the hands-on stuff that I learned at Charity, I have passed on through my entire career and my educational career, because I absolutely want patients as a rheumatologist to know and touch that patient and know the difference between an inflamed joint and a degenerative joint, and to do the muscle exam and to actually touch them. And it's imperative that they continue to do that. And we are the beacons of hope and light for the future generations, and we have to keep it going. And I'd like to thank Patrick Norton for working with the city of New Orleans and coming with a project that will bring a different revenue stream to the city of New Orleans. This is where I am from. This is where I am going to retire. This is where my grandbaby is. My husband and I are anxious to look at the condos in that place because this is imperative that we have more than tourism and just the cultural stuff to bring to the city. We need to bring other development to the city, and this is phenomenal. And the research is just phenomenal.
I wish we had more time for if you have more questions, please send them in and we will try to get the answers for you. So thank you to all the panelists tonight. Thank you, Patrick, particularly for a great presentation. It's been enriching, informative. And if you want to share your memories of Big Charity, there is a link in the chat to a kudos board where you can actually put your memories up there. That would be kind of neat to maybe include in that little charity ward room. We'd love to hear from all of you. Those questions in the chat, like I said, that we didn't have time to answer will be sent by email to you, the answers after tonight's webinar. Please continue to watch for the School of Medicine email invitations for our webinars and have a great evening. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Madeline. You did a great
Thank
job.
you.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Good night,
We all
everyone.
love Tulane, so we appreciate it.